Well, the latest on what's happening in Ukraine currently at 8 o'clock. Well, Russia has claimed that Russian troops are closing in on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. You can see their visuals. This was of earlier in the day of explosions. Meanwhile, India has also begun evacuations of its citizens. The Indian Foreign Minister has also spoken to the Ukrainian Foreign Minister for their safe return. Ukraine has urged for India's intervention. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has issued a statement saying that Russian President Vladimir Putin is ready for delegation talks with Ukraine in Belarus, in Minsk. Also, President Putin has spoken to China's President Xi and to France's President Emmanuel Macron. Also, today, the UN Security Council will be meeting later tonight. There's likely to be a vote. Meanwhile, the devastation continues across parts of Ukraine. Russia is maintaining that they're not looking at civilian casualties. Ukraine is saying that many have died, but they say that they've also taken Russian soldiers as casualties. Let's go across for more now, currently with to Jyoti Hire, who is in Kyiv. Jyoti, what's the latest you have?
Okay, so right now I am in Oblon, which there has been movement, there have been tanks, there has been reported fighting. Right now in the streets, you can see that it's pretty silent, and that's because a lot of the areas have been cut off. And we are here with I have someone here who has just seen what was happening in these streets just a short time ago, so he's going to share with us what he saw. And it's, can you say your name again, please?
AIO1.
Okay, so can you please tell us what you saw on these streets here?
I saw groups of military tanks, as well as fighter ships, the jet fighters.
Where in this, are you saying that you saw it here, exactly here, or further down? So we are a little bit outside of Oblon, so we're not exactly where it's happening. We're like, I would say about 5 to 7 minutes out.
Yeah, it was a bit further to the end of the city, and the friend speaks with us and saw two fighter ships flying over the river. Which
so let's just, can you just say your name, please? If you could just say your name. So what's your name in English? Your name? Alec. Okay, what?
My name Alec.
Okay, so what did you see in Oblon? Can you tell us what you saw? You can look into the camera, please. Can you say the name?
Шла самолеты, истребители на малой высоте уходили на север. Есть, да. Север, норд.
Okay, can you please translate for us what he just said?
Я не прячусь, они
double fighter ships going over the river.
Over the Dnieper River, okay.
Да, они вышли вот так вот с такой глиссады,
Okay. Okay. So thank you. So this is what you've been seeing here today. Okay. And how about yourself? Have you in your home? Have you experienced? Do you hear any of the explosives and the shaking that was happening earlier this afternoon?
Quite a lot, especially this morning. Bit quiet middle day. And now some sounds are here.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Jyoti, really, you've been reporting through the day, and we saw you also today in that bomb shelter and talking to Indians, because that, of course, is when we talk about war, it's really the reality is being lived out right now, where you are with those residents huddled in bomb shelters. I just want to play out those reports you had sent.
I am in a metro station turned bomb shelter, and as you can see here behind me, I'll just take you around a little bit. People are here; they're ready to tuck in and be here for the night. You know, some people are sleeping, doing whatever they can to all the pets. You know, dogs, cats, all the family members are here and waiting to see what's next. It's pretty clear that the Russian troops are, you know, they keep.
Yesterday, you woke up and all of a sudden, your adopted city is, you know, it appears to be going to be under siege. How do you feel right now about what's happening?
I feel not safe there because there is so much dangerous, and people, all the markets and are closed. No have to food. That's why I'm want to India, the way of to Poland. because I'm from work and my some student friend come for study, and they also face some problem. So I'm in very dangerous situation, and I appeal to the Indian government to help the Indian people.
So, you know, we just have an example of two people trying to get out of the city. And the real difficult part is that perhaps those that left yesterday morning had a really good chance. But now, as we see, the Russian troops are actually in Kyiv, very close to Kyiv on the perimeter. It's going to be even harder for people to leave here, especially people trying to find tickets and other types of transportation.
Thanks so much, Jyoti, for those live reports. But let's go across to Vishnu, who's actually got the latest on what's happening diplomatically, because we're seeing lots of negotiations, those phone calls to President Putin from President Xi and President Macron, and of course, that UNSC meeting coming up tonight. But first, Vishnu, what's the latest now on where Russia is actually moving?
Well, with widespread reports of Russia intensifying its attacks on the territory of Ukraine, it now appears increasingly likely that the battle for Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, may be entering a decisive phase. Already there are reports and videos of Russian flags being raised on Ukrainian territory elsewhere. Now, it is difficult to verify the authenticity of a lot of the claims and counterclaims, but before we bring you the latest developments, there's a lot that we can show you in terms of the videos which have been coming in. So this actually shows Kyiv, Mariupol, Sumy and Donetsk. These are the areas which we've seen the biggest fighting which has actually taken place. Russian missile attacks, Russian artillery shelling, the extensive use of air power by both sides. Reports that the Ukrainians have shot down more than 5 Russian combat aircraft. In Kyiv, a building has been struck. In Mariupol as well. In Sumy, we've seen the images from outside a kindergarten showing a few people dead over there. And in Donetsk, which lies further to the east. So there has been a fair amount of devastation, but in terms of loss of life, which is obviously the key question, we do not really know at this stage. Well, these are the major developments, broadly speaking, on the Ukraine front. Russian forces are reported to be attacking multiple fronts. They appear to have entered the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Now, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry is urging residents to Kyiv to make Molotov cocktails, bombs, and attack Russian invaders. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that at least 137 people have been killed so far, including citizens. This information a few hours old. The UN Refugee Agency says that about 1 lakh Ukrainians have been displaced. Western nations have announced sweeping sanctions. The External Affairs Ministry has rushed officials to several border crossing points as it works for a plan to evacuate 18,000 odd Indian nationals from the area, primarily out of western Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi has spoken to the Russian president earlier, appealing for an immediate ceasefire and dialogue, and has explained his concerns on Indian nationals. And I think the really big development in just the last little while is that in a conversation between the Russian president and China's president Xi Jinping, there has been a sense that Russia may be willing to talk about Minsk, talk about a peace process in Minsk, but with senior officials from the Russian side representing the Russian president. Let's see if that happens. But first, let's take a look at the multiple fronts from where Russian forces have now invaded Ukraine. Now, the map of the Ukraine you see over here shows the areas in red which Russia captured in 2014, Crimea in the south, and Russian separatists captured parts of Donbass to the east, you can see over there. This now shows the broad routes of the Russian invasion in the next point from Crimea in the south, Donbass in the east, and now down south from Belarus in the north. So those are all of the fronts from where the Russians have been attacking. And now let's take a look at the areas which have been targeted. These areas include Kharkiv, Chernobyl, Gostomel, and now Kyiv itself. Finally, if we have this, we've actually got images from AFP which shows some of the fighting in Kyiv itself, a map location. We'll try and bring that for you later on. But it is quite clear now that the threat of international sanctions has not deterred Vladimir Putin at all. But will these eventually have an impact? Well, the reason, the reason the Russians actually appear to be making a lot of headway in this conflict is because of the massive disparity in the strength of the armed forces of both sides. Head to head, Ukraine has 2 lakh active personnel, Russia has 9 lakh. Ukraine has 9 lakh reserve personnel, Russia 20 lakh. Ukraine has more than 2,000 artillery pieces, Russia more than 7,500. Ukraine has 12,000 plus armored vehicles, Russia has 30,000. Ukraine has 2,596 tanks, Russia more than 12,420. Remember, a large number of these Russian resources have actually been deployed.
So thanks so much, Vishnu. As you pointed out, that those really are the top developments. And of course, we know that the world is looking now at what will happen at the UN Security Council meet. Remember, ironically, it is, of course, chaired by Russia. So India and China's stand will be watched very closely at that UN Security Council meet, which happens today, this after a day of hectic diplomacy with President Xi of China speaking to President Putin, as did the French president speak to Putin as well. Also, the Ukrainian foreign minister spoke to India's foreign minister Jaishankar, who said that India is determined to continue with diplomacy and dialogue and asked Ukraine for help to get Indian students out. Importantly, also today, US President Joe Biden, when asked on what he'd like India to do in regards to its stand on Russia, said that consultations are still on. India has made it very clear it believes in dialogue and restraint from all sides.
Sir, India, which is a major defense partner of the United States, is India fully with you on the issue of Ukraine and Russia?
We're in consultation with India today. We haven't resolved that completely.
One more question.
Цим ранком ми захищаємо нашу державу наодинці. Як і вчора, найпотужніші сили світу спостерігають здалеку. Чи переконали Росії вчорашні санкції? Ми чуємо у своєму небі і бачимо на своїй землі, що цього недостатньо. Чужі війська все ще намагаються активізуватись на нашій території.
Well, some good news is that evacuation of Indian students has begun in Ukraine. Now, this is happening from the Poland border. So this is, as you can see there, the first bus with Indian students on board. Today, the Indian Embassy issued an advisory saying print out the flag, put it on your cars, or however you can get to the borders. And we are setting up at the borders with Hungary, Romania and Poland to get Indian students out. Air India flights will be flown specially to these neighboring countries where the airspace is open, and it will be free for students who want to come back to India. So India carrying out these evacuation operations. There's the first batch of Indian students we see who have got to the Poland border with Ukraine. But the fact remains that an estimated 18,000 Indian students still stranded. Many are still stuck in bomb shelters.
ना कॉल है ना मदद है, कुछ भी नहीं है उसके पास, कुछ भी ना खाने का चीज है ना कुछ। बच्चे डरे हुए हैं, बात भी कर रहे तो कांप रहे। मैं सरकार से प्लीज गुजारिश कर रही हूँ, मोदी सरकार से प्लीज हमारे बच्चे को जल्द से जल्द वापस ले आए। बच्चे काफी डरे हुए हैं वहाँ पे और रो रहे हैं वहीं पे बच्चे।
Anxious parents whose children are stuck in Ukraine are now camping outside the Ukrainian embassy in New Delhi for updates. Kunaldeep Singh travelled from Amritsar to Delhi to find out more about his daughter, who is hiding in a basement in Kyiv city with other students.
जो हमारी बच्चों से बात हो रही है, 700 बच्चे उन्हीं हॉस्टल में हैं। बीच बीच में लाइट चले जाती है, वहाँ पे सब कुछ गैस के साथ चलता है, तो वहाँ पे गैस की भी जो सप्लाई है वो वहाँ पे रुकी हुई है फिलहाल। ये खाने पीने का हो गया, सब समस्या आ रही है क्योंकि उनको मेस में जाना पड़ता है खाने के लिए, जो कि हॉस्टल से थोड़ा दूर है। तो मैं चाहता हूँ गवर्नमेंट को कि भी खार्किव से ही डायरेक्ट उनको कुछ इंतज़ाम हो जाए, जो वो इंडिया में आ सके या किसी भी नेबरिंग जो कंट्री है जहाँ पे evacuation हो सके।
Every day, Indian students are releasing fresh SOS messages for evacuation.
Please evacuate all Indian students. There are more than 15,000 students who have been stuck in this country. Please help us out. We need help.
The shops have been closed down. We have been stuck here for more than 24 hours without food, water, or even proper ventilation.
With pressure from families and state chief ministers increasing, special evacuation flights have now been organized from countries neighboring Ukraine like Poland, Hungary and Romania. Instructions include students asked to arrange their own mode of transport up to Ukrainian borders. Students advised to print Indian flag and paste on vehicles while travelling. Students advised to carry passport, cash preferably in US dollars and essential items. In a sigh of relief, the Indian government has announced that evacuation flights for the stranded Indians in Ukraine will take place in the upcoming days, and the cost of these flights will be borne by the government of India. The biggest concern, however, that still remains is how these Indians who are stranded in different parts of Ukraine will commute to the neighboring countries amid the conflict escalating in Ukraine. Mahesh Sharma, father of an MBBS student stranded in Ukraine, appeals to the government to provide a safe passage for the students to reach the neighboring countries.
जब सब कुछ अब वहाँ से निकाला जा रहा है, इक्वेशन किया जा रहा है, तो हम कम गवर्नमेंट को ये जैसे ये हेल्प तो करें. समस्या क्या है, यदि बच्चा आएगा तो कैसे आएगा? टर्नोपल से पोलैंड का जो बॉर्डर है, वहाँ तक जाने में कम से कम 12 या 13 घंटे बाई बस लगेंगे.
As the invasion continues in Ukraine, approximately 16,000 students are stranded in the country. And while the government is now planning evacuations, all eyes are on the execution of this plan with the safety of all involved. With camera person Mohammad Mursaleen, Akshay Dongre for NDTV.
And let's look at what the big worry is in India also on how Putin's Ukraine war will hit India. Well, a spike in prices and inflation is likely of petrol, diesel, natural gas and edible oil. This as India's crude oil basket has crossed $100 per barrel. That's of course global crude oil prices, and that leads to huge inflation risk. Remember, currently we've had no hikes in fuel because of elections are going on, but come March 8th, be braced for a huge petrol and fuel price hike. Retail inflation currently is already above 6%. So this is likely to hit us hard. Meanwhile, today, markets have gained over 2%. That's, of course, because they crashed over 2,700 points yesterday. This because market observers apparently feel that there could be some scope for diplomacy and negotiation, as both NATO and President Biden have indicated that they don't want to send troops into Ukraine. Well, we have time for some quick Indian news, and this really is the story, the biggest twist we've seen so far. The mysterious Himalayan yogi in the National Stock Exchange advising the then CEO between 2013 to 16 has been identified. And guess what? The Himalayan yogi wasn't in the Himalayas at all. In fact, he was in the NSC. He's Anand Subramanian, who was then the group operating officer of the NSC and the main beneficiary of the scam. So Arvind has more details. So Arvind, I have to say, so the Himalayan yogi recommended to the NSC CEO Chitra Ramakrishna to give 4 crores to Anand Subramanian, and he turns out to be Anand Subramanian.
Yeah, Sonia, the Central Bureau of Investigation has tracked the identity of the face.
Expedited its investigation in the 2018 co-location stock market manipulation case, and after questioning Anand Subramanian for 4 days, the agency yesterday decided to arrest him, and he was brought to Delhi today morning. So our sources in the Central Bureau of Investigation have confirmed to us that they have got evidence revealing that Anand Subramanian was the person who actually created this particular mail ID that was purportedly used by this faceless yogi from Himalaya. So this mail ID, rikyajur@outlook.com, was the mail ID created by Anand Subramanian, and he was communicating with Chitra Ramakrishna through emails, and then he was influencing the functioning of the stock exchange, that is the NSE. What the agency sources have also told NDTV is that this is not the only evidence that the agency has got. Also, the agency has also got evidence showing that some of the mails that Chitra sent to this particular yogi's mail account were in fact marked to his Anand Subramanian's official account also. And during the questioning and also during the investigation, the agency has also retrieved some of the screenshots of this particular mail that was sent by Chitra.
So, but then obviously Chitra Ramakrishna was part of this elaborate scam with Anand Subramanian, because clearly she knew his identity and all those emails of going to the Seychelles together, etc. So did that actually happen? So it was a conspiracy, the CBI claims, hatched by both Chitra Ramakrishna and Anand Subramanian to fool the NSC board.
Yeah, Sonia, in fact, that's a bigger investigation that the agency is looking into. It's not just the personal mails that were exchanged between Chitra and this yogi, purported yogi, but also very importantly, some of the confidential information about the stock market was also sent to this particular yogi account. And what the agency sources are suspecting is that this particular information was in turn shared with outsiders, making a huge financial gains to all the stock market. And that's the bigger investigation that the agency is looking into to find the end beneficiary of this entire scam.
Exactly, because as you pointed, this is not some personal matter. This is India's biggest stock exchange. So how was this running ripped between 2013 to 2016? Many tough questions there. Thanks, Arvind, for that update. And before we end, a quick look, at news which really has dominated what's happening in Karnataka and raised questions on education for minority girls and how it should be handled. The High Court of Karnataka today reserved the judgment on petitions challenging the hijab ban inside classrooms. The court, however, did not say when the order of judgment will be pronounced. At present, colleges and schools continue to follow the High Court's interim order that restrains students from wearing any religious symbols, whether it's a hijab or a saffron shawl, inside campuses and classrooms. So after 11 days, the hearings are over. The Karnataka High Court now reserved that judgment.